We are monitoring some startling national security developments today out of Washington. President-elect Joe Biden's team is striking down the acting Pentagon chief's claim that an apparent halt in their transition process with the Defense Department was some sort of mutually agreed upon holiday break. Biden's transition director telling reporters today, with the appropriate level of concern that this is not normal, said this, quote, "There was no mutually agreed upon holiday break. In fact, we think it's important that briefings and other engagements continue during this period, as there's no time to spare." And that is particularly true in the aftermath of the ascertainment delay. There have been pockets of recalcitrance, and the DOD is one of them. The potentially damaging dispute comes at an incredibly precarious time. We continue to learn the extent this week of a months-long cyber attack, most likely carried out by Russia, and it could be the worst one ever in the United States. As Trump continues to resist criticizing Russia, remaining silent on the topic, and putting a lot on the plate of the new president, who will be sworn in 33 days from now. Joining us now, NBC News senior national security analyst, former CIA Director John Brennan. First, Director Brennan, on this Pentagon news, the miscalculation that somehow the Biden team was going to carry on their lie about a holiday break. I've been involved in 2 transitions. There's no holiday break when it's a transition to the new president. What do you think they're covering up?
Oh, my goodness. What a question. I have no idea. But you're absolutely right. There should be no holiday break, particularly given recent events and news about the hacking of government computer networks. I led the intelligence transition effort for the President Obama group that was coming in 2008, 2009. And the CIA that I worked with in the intelligence community, we worked day in and day out to make sure that there was going to be that smooth and seamless transition. So I think it's just mind-boggling that the Department of Defense would stop these engagements at such a critical time.
Especially considering the cast of characters over there. I want to turn to that cyber attack because I believe it was 4 years ago this week that you were part of the Obama national security team that worked to put sanctions on Russia in place for their attack on the 2016 election. Obviously, Donald Trump reacting very, very differently to the cyber attack that reaches across the executive branch of government. But I want to show you how President-elect Biden responded last night in an interview.
They'll be held accountable. They'll be held accountable. Individuals as well as entities will be there's financial repercussions for what they did, ability to access a lot, and we have to invest a lot more money in cyber. We have to invest a lot more money in dealing with the ability to respond as well as the ability to be more protect both private and public entities. And we haven't made that commitment. We will under my administration.
So, Director Brennan, there was no breaking news alert that went out after he said that, but it shouldn't go unnoticed that no one has said these words about Russia in 4 years. Quote, "They'll be held accountable." No one has held Russia accountable in 4 years. What do you think the policy process is right now around Russia and around this attack for the incoming team?
Well, I think it's clear that the professionals within the intelligence community and the national security environment are hesitant to bring news about Russian nefarious activities to Donald Trump, given Donald Trump's decision to protect Vladimir Putin and the Russians. But you're absolutely right. It was 4 years ago when the Obama administration decided to impose sanctions and also to throw out of the country 36 Russian diplomats. These are the types of actions that can be taken against the Russians. Yes, this was an espionage activity. Yes, it was something that, a lot of countries and intelligence services engage in. But when you get caught, you have to pay a price. When we got caught in the past, we had to pay a price. And the magnitude of this demands that a president of the United States and the national security team focus like a laser on this to find out what happened, try to stem the bleeding, and then take appropriate action against the perpetrators.
There's some analysis out there that Trump is doing this on purpose to leave a bigger mess for Joe Biden. But I think that gets 2 things wrong. 1, that Trump is strategic, and 2, that there's anything extra you have to do to make a mess with U.S. Russian relations. But I wonder from the Russian perspective, what should we prepare for? Obviously, they caught us unprepared. There's reporting that this cyber attack has been underway for many, many months, undetected. What are your concerns about how far Russia may have come over the last 4 years with the president totally subservient to their policy aims?
Well, the Russians, and particularly the SVR, which is the rough CIA equivalent for Russia, they have very, very sophisticated cyber capabilities. And the fact that they've been in on these networks, both in the government as well as in the private sector, for what could be 7 or 8 months, the professionals right now in the cybersecurity environment in the U.S. government have a world of work to do. Find out what networks were accessed by the Russians, what information might have been extracted, how they actually got this information and this malware into the system. It seems as though it was part of a commercial software update that was then just propagated throughout the government as well as the private sector. Well, did the Russians have a human source in that company that was able to integrate that malware into the updates? And so there's a lot of forensic work that needs to be done in order to understand exactly what the Russians did. Did the Russians drop some malware that could be activated at some point that could, in fact, have a disabling function or destructive function? Were they able to get into some of those critical support systems, that, including for critical infrastructure? We don't know yet. And that's why I think Congress is demanding to have some answers from the administration. But Donald Trump has not even addressed it, much less said anything seriously about it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.